everyone, I'm Brian Zane and welcome to Wrestling with Regret. This week on the show, I want to talk about the Union. No, not that union. I'm talking about the wrestling union that a lot of people have wanted for decades, but has never been realized. Quick disclaimer before we go on, I'm aware that this is a very vast and complex issue, so forgive me if I gloss over or skip any parts about this debate. I'm just trying to make this easy to digest. Most wrestlers on every level in the hierarchy are working without representation. There are no unions in place to collectively bargain for them and their rights and their needs. Nothing in WWE, nothing in the Indies or Impact Wrestling or New Japan or Ring of Honor, nowhere. So the top names in wrestling today, they're probably taken care of. They're well connected with their promoters and the bookers, so they, I think, are in a good place. But pretty much everyone else in the food chain is suffering. Wrestlers today work as independent contractors. They still have to pay taxes, though in some cases not as much as they would have to if they were full-time employees. But on top of that, on the flip side, they also have to pay for their own health insurance, as well as many of the other costs associated with being a full-time wrestler. Being an independent contractor, for the most part, works fine on the independent level. You guys can work pretty much anywhere they want to without any ramifications because technically they're no one's employee. However, on the flip side, if you work for WWE, you're still an independent contractor, but you're not allowed to work for anyone else. You can't do any side projects without the company's consent, and if you're hurt, you would better be expected to work through the pain or risk losing money and possibly your job by sitting on the shelf. Unless your name is John Cena or Triple H, good luck having the company foot your medical bills. A wrestler in WWE has all the responsibilities of a full-time employee with none of the benefits. Indie guys don't even get the luxury of working for WWE. Jesse Ventura tried to get wrestlers within WWF to unionize back in the 1980s, but those plans were ultimately squashed for two reasons. One, because a lot of the wrestlers involved ultimately didn't want to risk rocking the boat, and two, allegedly, Hulk Hogan found out what was going on and told the higher-ups. Let's talk broadly for a second here. Let's say hypothetically one huge union were formed that would cover all the wrestlers in the country, or maybe we could break it down to a state-by-state basis. If that thing were to happen, at the very least, it would address the health and well-being of wrestlers in the union, both physically and mentally as well. It would also address the issue of money and of legal and contractual issues. Can you imagine if wrestlers had a union? It means they would be forced to be paid in more than a hot dog and a handshake. It means if they got injured, then they wouldn't have to pay for all of the medical expenses. They wouldn't get jobbed out or fired for petty political reasons. Wrestlers would have autonomy. It would be great. But the more you think about how good it would be for a wrestling union to exist, the more holes get poked into the fantasy. Professional wrestling is ludicrously unregulated. Sure, some states require more than others in terms of, licensing and blood work and permits and insurance and all that. But even if we did away with the idea of a nationwide, all-encompassing union and broke it down state by state, there would still be this huge case of haves and have-nots between state and state. And even trying to get all the wrestlers to unionize would be difficult because obviously not everyone's a full-time wrestler. There's weekend warriors and hobbyists and things. So there would just be huge chaos there. There would be a disparity in the workforce between state to state, and it could actually risk killing some territories. Having a union that required all wrestlers to be paid would lead to the instant death of several promotions out there. And believe me, I totally think that paying the boys should be like the top priority if you're a promoter. But there are even some good, well-meaning promoters who just really can't do it. Requiring that wrestlers be paid would lead to the closure of several promotions, and that might lead to the loss of gigs and experience for a lot of wrestlers out there. And let's talk for a second about, say there was some kind of union-instituted pay scale in place. Not only would that hurt promoters, it could actually risk hurting wrestlers as well, because say they're making more money without the pay scale, but then they get knocked back. They would lose money that way. One tricky thing about labor unions is that sometimes unions and employers don't get along. They have disagreements, and that could sometimes lead to strikes. Now imagine you lived in a state with a wrestler union, and one day that union decided they were going to go on strike until they were all paid a better wage. That would mean no shows in your town, no shows in your state. That would not only suck for the wrestlers, but also you, the fans. Now imagine that scenario if WWE or Impact Wrestling had their own union and they went on strike. That would be a pretty huge deal. I mean, you remember when the NFL and the NBA and the NHL all had their work stoppages a few years ago, or the Hollywood writers' strike before that? It could happen to wrestling too if there were a union, and like those other things that I mentioned, it would hit fans the hardest. The biggest reason people like Vince McMahon and other promoters around the country don't want a labor union for wrestlers is because they want to have complete control over their talent. They're unwilling and unable to face an army of wrestlers that all have power and representation. You know, they no longer have an advantage over the workers. Promoters can do what they want to who they want without repercussions. A union could create accountability in an industry where there really is none and could give wrestlers the autonomy they desperately need. But the industry as a whole is so layered and fragmented and, oh my god, so many egos that depending on what kind of scale you're talking about, there's really no way it could ever work. I could see a day where maybe a group of local promoters in one state teamed up with a group of local veterans and their athletic commission to make something kind of like a union, but I mean, who knows when or if that's ever going to happen. And if a union's ever formed in WWE in my lifetime, I will be amazed. So what do you think about the issue of unions in wrestling? Do you think the industry actually needs a union? How would it work? What would you do to make a wrestling union work? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. I'm also going to include some links, I'm going to put them in the description section, of some different articles from varying viewpoints about the subject, just in case you want to read up more about this topic and what other people are saying. Be sure to thumbs up this video, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, and buy the t-shirt. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.